Your Excellencies, distinguished guests to this auspicious occasion, congratulations on this historic feat where we launch the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System. It is the first time in recent years that we take a serious practical step at making Africa's money work for Africa's development. Because you see, the 5 billion that is lost annually in African exporters having to pay in external currencies to engage in trade will start to be a thing of the past. And so this money can stay on the continent. It can build productive capacity, it can scale businesses, it can take us closer to that much desired Africa we want. I look back with fond memories in 2019 at that important summit in Niger, where the idea first came up of a Pan-African payment and settlement system. At the time, it seemed far off, maybe even impossible. But as Africa is showing the world in recent years, impossible is nothing. And so you might ask yourself, why is she telling us about the PAPSS when we have been engaged at it for the entire day? And we're supposed to be talking very much about value chains. Well, it's precisely because the second most important question after the launch of this PAPSS is payment systems and transactions for what? And this is where the Futures Report 2021 comes into play, titled, Which Value Chains for a Made in Africa Revolution? You see, it is very important that we scope and understand what is truly on offer in preferential terms in the AFCFTA. So as we leave the political statements, as we leave the projected analysis, we must now land it firmly on what is concretely on offer in terms of what AU members are exchanging between and amongst themselves in goods and services, i.e., what will constitute that 90% that we're starting with, and what will constitute those services sectors. The Futures Report is an influential report that's jointly published by the AFCFTA Secretariat and UNDP. And what we're really trying to do is to build on a vision of the Secretary General, Mr. Wamkele Mene, to keep a pulse on what's happening in the AFCFTA and to implement also the parallel vision of the Assistant Secretary General, Ms. Ahunna Eziakonwa, who is in charge of development at UNDP Africa, to put UNDP's muscle at the heart of accelerating implementation of the AFCFTA. And so we undertook a first-in-time rigorous assessment to tease out and understand what is the meat on the bones. And the results are fascinating. 10 value chains emerge. And I'll tell you about them because they're critical to how you then come in, which is the next point I will address. First, what are these value chains? Automobiles. Yes, it is possible. The markets are shaping up for those made in Africa cars. And while in the past people thought, well, can we really make cars? Of course. I mean, stories are emerging, industry practice is emerging in countries like Nigeria, in Rwanda, in Uganda, and others of these cars. And what the AFCFTA is telling us through this Futures Report is that the tariff structure is starting to align in support. The second critical value chain is lithium-ion batteries. These are the batteries that, when you think about it, give us the first opportunity to create proper beneficiation in the minerals sector in Africa. Because we've often spoken about the continent as that one then exports its minerals in commodity raw form. But when you think about lithium-ion batteries, they are a confluence that brings together titanium, cobalt, and all of those, lithium itself included. And so we can start to produce those batteries on the continent that power the electronic car. See how the reality of the fourth industrial revolution is meeting Africa, the promise of transformative industrialization. The third value chain, leather and leather products. When you think about it, Africa has 25% of the world's population of sheep and goats, and also 10% of the world's cattle population. What this means practically is that we have the raw material to produce the hide as a first part in the chain. We can then move from there and get into tanning. We can then move from there and produce the leather. that they can then produce all these great products, shoes, bags, belts, name it, car seats, etc. That is critical. And then we go into the next one, clothing, textiles, apparel. You know, we've often spoken about Africa, those of us that have been engaged also at the multilateral trading system level. We've spoken about Africa as needing markets to export its cotton. We all know the story of the C4, Benin, Mali, Burkina, and others. You know, at that time, we really thought about exporting cotton. But think about what the AFCFTA is telling us, that we have an opportunity not only for the lint, but for the yarn, right? But also for weaving the fabrics and ultimately preparing those apparels and made-ups, which means practically that we're starting to see different stages of opportunities in that chain that can be the proposition, the business proposition of exporters on the ground. What else is happening in the value chains? Number 5, soya. And here we're talking about the whole range, from the beans to the oil, to the cake, to the animal feed, and indeed to the sauce. And then we talk about cocoa, a fascinating story, again, where Africa has 75% of the world's cocoa production. Countries like Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana stand out. And yet we don't see enough of a transition into the chocolate bars, for example. And so what we're seeing out of this assessment in the futures report is that there are opportunities to move from the beans to the butter, to the paste, to the chocolate. Indeed, we're starting to see the possibility of the tariff structure supporting that. What else is there? We're talking now about pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals are critical. Here we are amidst a gruesome pandemic. What will it take for Africa to produce its own pharmaceutical products, medicines, etc.? And we're seeing encouraging movements towards zero tariffs in that area as well, in terms of the inputs, the production processes. Next, critical, vaccines. Vaccines are important. If we ever doubted that question, we now know as we're in the 3rd year of this horrible pandemic. And so what we're seeing again there is that the possibilities for the inputs into the preparation of the vaccines are also being supported by a good tariff structure in the AFCFTA. Then we go to the last 2. And here we're talking about mobile financial services. If you ever ask yourself a question, can Africa lead the 4th industrial revolution? In fact, in the case of mobile technology, we have demonstrated, mobile financial services, we have demonstrated that Africa is indeed leading. And so what does the AFCFTA practically do about this? It is the confluence of what you see in terms of offers in communication as a sector, and also in financial services. And what we're saying is that the two come together to create a series of opportunities. 1, to install additional infrastructure in terms of telecom, for example. 2nd, to build those platforms and offerings for financial services based on mobile telephony, on telecommunications, and then 3rd, various distribution points. And we're seeing that the services offers allow analytically for a finding that creates opportunities in that case. And then the final one, cultural services. Again, critical, because the continent busts with this wealth of culture, of heritage. How do you valorize it? This is what we're seeing with the opportunity for what we're seeing as great strides in places like Nollywood and so on and so forth, to have an anchoring in terms of supportive frameworks in the AFCFTA, from the writers of scripts through to the producers, all the production, and then finally to the distribution. And so all of this to say that it is real, it is there. The AFCFTA is giving us a viable business investment proposition in these 10 sectors. Now, why does it concern you? Why is it important for governors of central banks, for ministers of finance, and of course for ministers of trade? The latter, pretty clear. But let me say that in this room, for the first time, we have together in one place a get-together of those people whose day jobs, whose mandates are at the heart of whether we shall succeed effectively or not. And so as you're making your policy decisions as to which sectors will be part of your national development plan, which sectors will be prioritized for your industrialization process, which transactions will be given priority in terms of financing, which transactions indeed, including through the PAPSS, will be given preferential fast-track treatment to move. Think about a value chain lens. Think about this bigger development chain we're trying to pull together. Think about yourselves as part of a critical historic legacy that took the continent from that which exports raw materials, that which does not add value, to that which is propelling into value-added industrialization, accelerating transformation, and building that prosperity in terms of jobs, in terms of technology-based industrialization, in terms of wealth creation, especially for women and youth-owned exporting enterprises. And so we are part of a journey that is not turning back. And here I'd like to draw to a close in thanking the Secretary General, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, for the invitation, as well as Professor Benedict Arama, for the invitation to UNDP to participate and share the findings of this important report. I bring you strong solidarity, strong commitment from the Assistant Secretary General, Madam Ahunna Eziakonwa. UNDP is behind you. We are with you in all of your countries, on the ground. We want to walk this journey with you. We want to make sure that Made in Africa truly happened. And as we get into the steps of Made in Africa, I encourage you all to then buy African. Thank you very much.